Hello there. This is Daniel with Emergency Action Planning and the Act ASAP podcast. And today I am proud to have Debbie Morehead on the show, and she's going to discuss some very important things with us. But first, let me tell you a little bit about her. Now, Debbie Morehead, or Deborah Morehead, is a licensed marriage family therapist for 25 years. She's worked with thousands of our most vulnerable children and their families in the Los Angeles County foster care system. She has spoken with and trained over 10,000 people at local and national events, and she is the author of You Can't Get It Done by Doing What You Shouldn't Do. I know, what's up with that? Also, she's written a couple other books. One is Happy Life, and co-author of Conscious Love, Enlightened Relationship, and Soulful Sex. Oh my God, Debbie, where we're going with that one. And she's been interviewed multiple times on NBC, CBS, and Fox TV station affiliates. So what we're going to talk about today is safety and beyond, raising a resilient child. So Debbie, I want to thank you very, very much for coming and spending your time with me and talking with our people. What's happening, Debbie? And what's this whole thing about raising resilient children?
Daniel, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, and I love what you do in the world. Just is really, it's about, in my part, I'm going to say talking about families, right, is helping that family leadership, helping the parents of the family to create really the safe environments. And that's what I'm here to talk about, right? Which is resilient children. What is it that we're talking about? What is it that we're meaning, right? Here's the things that we do know is children grow up to be happier and more successful socially, emotionally, in other ways when parents or the primary caregivers are able to create a what's called a secure attachment. But what the heck does that mean? That's what creates the resilient kids.
So one second, you say a secure attachment. Does that mean like the bond between the parent and the child, or the caregiver and the child? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so that's exactly what we're talking about. We're really talking about a secure bond that goes, because there's a bond, right? Whether it's secure or not, there are bonds that happen between parents and children, right? But we're really talking about what really makes a secure bond for a child.
Okay.
And I have sorry.
I was just wondering, you mentioned there, we all bond one way or the other, good, bad, or indifferent, right? So we're looking, from what I understand, we're looking at a way to make a positive bond, something that'll be beneficial for both the parent and the child throughout their lives, right?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly right. I mean, the relationship between the parent and child can go on and be a great relationship, but most importantly, and that's why I use that word resilient, right? Most importantly is what a parent does in the tiniest little moments and in the bigger moments makes all the difference. And really what we're talking about is how the child's brain develops.
Okay. Yeah. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that by the time we're 9, our brain's pretty much set where it's going to be. And that means I'm way over the hill now, and I've got like nothing else I can do with this plasticity up here. So when we're developing that mind, what's the parent supposed to do? I mean, there's no handbook on this, right? Did I get a handbook when my baby was born? No, I didn't.
Wouldn't that be nice if we all got a handbook?
So how do we make this happen?
Yeah, I will let you know. And speaking of a book, right, I will let you know some of the pieces that I'm taking from and do come from an amazing psychiatrist that's called Dan Siegel. He's put together this entire group of basically it's all sorts of different people from the different fields, psychology, neuroscience, sociology, all different fields to say what works, what makes people successful, what makes people happier in life. And he puts a lot of things together that are specifically for children. So the first part of what I want to be talking about is really, it is from his book called The Power of Showing Up. And he talks about, and I just feel like it's so important, and it fits into some of what you say as well around disaster management and other pieces, but I'll take it further for the emotional aspect, which is the first thing is about safety. Parents need to create a safe environment. So there's so many different elements and ways that you create a safe environment, and that's both physically and emotionally, right?
Okay.
You do all sorts of things on the physical, but it becomes so important. Oftentimes I use an example of like 2-year-olds are walking alongside us. We're out for a walk and they're walking alongside us, and a dog starts coming towards them. Interestingly, the 2-year-old doesn't look at the dog and decide what they're supposed to do or how they're supposed to feel. They look up at the parent.
That's right. They want to get their guidance from mom or dad or wherever they're walking with. So that brings up a question here. If the parent is going to create a safe environment for the child, there's a lot of ways we can rationally think about that. Now, I know some parents I've personally spoken to about disaster planning, and they will not talk to their child about it because they want to keep their child safe from it. And I'm thinking, so when that earthquake or that hurricane happens, how are they going to be safe if they don't know what to do? So we have a lot of different people think differently on this concept. So what direction should they go? Should they discuss these dangers that are in their life? Should they ignore them and bubble wrap their child and hopefully someday the child will figure it out? Or what are we going to do here?
You do not want to bubble wrap them, and you also do not want to overwhelm them with information that is beyond their developmental stage.
Right. Okay.
Right. So it's right in the in-between space. I was working with a woman whose mother had an anxiousness, and her anxiousness in particular was around the idea. And I don't know, it probably came from her child somewhere, but the anxiousness was around when you're out walking around, a white van can come and take you away. And she sent that message, that fear message, and that message to her children.
Right.
Right. That's an overwhelming. Is there a reality about that? There are bad people in the world that may try to kidnap you or something like that. Yes. But are you going to keep making that child feel your anxiety constantly about that every time they're out and about? That's not very helpful for the child.
Well, but that's what's made the human race survive this long. We've had this nervous Nelly that lives in the back of our brain, and every time we hear that rustle in the bush or we see that bright yellow thing with black stripes hiding in the far away, we get this little thing going in our brain. It's normal. It's part of human nature, right? But what you're saying is just don't overwhelm with fear. There's things to look out for, because eventually every white van that drives by is going to scare the kid to death, right? And not all weirdos drive white vans. So how do we balance that whole issue? How do we let that nervous Nelly out with the child and still educate them as opposed to making them fearful?
Yeah, so that's exactly what we want to do. So I'm going to go back to that little 2-year-old that sees the dog and looks up at the parent, what to do, right? Mm-hmm. The parent's job is not to have this, dog, oh no, we're going right, because then that's going to communicate that to the child. But a parent's job is to keep the child safe physically, right? So a parent's job would be to do something. And so, this goes right along with what you're talking about, Daniel. A parent's job would be to be able to, kind of lean down and, scoop the little 2-year-old up so they're up and out of the dog's way and go, oh, look at that cute little doggy. And then the parent, tests, is this dog safe, or is it growling, or what do we need to do, right? But to keep the child safe, right? But to not overwhelm them with the fear. And that's exactly what we want to do, going with disaster management that you do. We want to help children to know that we live in California and there might be earthquakes, right? I mean, that's why in the schools, we have earthquake drills, right? So when we actually do, it actually, believe it or not, sometimes I often think about children and safety is what children need is containment. They need choices, but they need containment. Right. That's what makes them feel safe. So when there is possibly going to be an earthquake, or when you're teaching child, again, it's at the developmental stage for them, and how you would talk to them about it. But for them to know that, hey, we've got all these emergency things out here so that if something happens, we're safe. So you're actually teaching them that. And the same thing is true in that example with the 2-year-old and in so many other ways. And then, of course, emotionally, because what's happening, like in that little 2-year-old example, I'm both helping them to manage the emotion because I'm managing my emotion while keeping them safe and not adding more fear to something that isn't going to be helpful for them.
Okay, so that's the first level of your 4 S's to developing a resilient child. Safe. Now, you have safe, seen, soothed, and secure. So now we're working on something to keep the child safe and let them understand they're safe. That's very important that they understand that, right? That they are safe.
Yes,
Okay.
that they are safe, there's predictable care that creates a sense of safety physically and emotionally. And then, of course, we move on to seen. And so what the heck does seen mean? Right? Seen, again, it's really about that we're paying attention to them. Right?
Okay.
Children come into this world, and I often use like 2 or 3-year-olds because they're so much freer at that stage. They haven't started to be tainted by school and other things.
Right.
Sometimes it happens, right? If you think about a delightful little 3-year-old, that there's a whole bunch of adults sitting in the front room area, there's a little party going on, and a little 3-year-old, is so excited because she's got a new little dress, and she comes down and she twirls around and she has a delightful time. And what should happen is that the adult should pay attention to that. Right. Now, that doesn't mean that she gets to take up the whole conversation or everything, right? But there is a sense of what you are doing, what you are creating, who you are. I am seeing you. And so that's what we want to do, both physically. So that's why, like, as we get older, parents coming to our baseball games or our, gymnastics tournaments or, piano recitals or whatever, that the parents see us. But it's also about seeing us in our inside world. So if we have if a child comes home and they didn't get the best grade on something and they're really sad about it, being able to come alongside them, and we'll talk about this because that's the other thing with the soothing, but you've seen is that you actually see their inside worlds. You go, wow, I bet you that really makes you feel sad, or that really makes you feel mad.
Okay, so it sounds like being seen has a lot to do with just a recognition of the individual. I know as a child, when they're real young, and I'm just thinking out loud, they are not yet invested in themselves. They are not yet the most important person in their world. Mommy and daddy probably are.
Yes,
so mommy and daddy are ignoring the child. That's going to be detrimental to the child's welfare, their mental health, and their upbringing, and the family relationship. So when you say being seen, we want to recognize their physical presence, but also their emotional and mental presence.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's what being seen means.
Okay. And so are there little tools and tricks that we can do for that? Let's say the child might be a little introverted and is not wanting to be seen. How can we sort of pull, you know who I'm talking about, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. What's really interesting, right, is because even if they're introverted, which is very true, they may not want to be doing twirling out in front, right? But they may be in the corner somewhere and they're playing with their Legos, right? Or something like that. And it's still about as you walk by and you see them and you go, wow, look at what you built. That's so amazing, right? That's what creates that seen sense when they do come home with their drawing from school and you put it up on the refrigerator. Those are all ways that starts to build that, oh, look at, I have an impact on the world and the people around me. I am significant. I am important.
So some sort of positive reflection, some positive reinforcement that recognizes the child's pure existence is good for the child, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay, can we take that to a negative side? I've known, I've seen some families where all they see is the bad thing the child's doing, and that's all they reinforce. How can we avoid that? I mean, I understand that it comes from our enculturalization, the way we were raised, but where's that deep understanding that we can dig out within ourselves to realize it's not the thing to keep passing on in the generations?
Yeah, and when we talk later about that, at the end, the family leadership and what my, what I have to offer them and everything, because you have to really know about your own parenting and what happens so that you can do it better.
Right.
See, there a lot of times that comes from thinking that you're helping the child to be better, right? But the statistics and the research clearly shows, there was a saying, several years ago in this classroom about catch them being good idea, right? Getting the teachers to praise. Statistically, what we know is that children to thrive, right? And this is what we're talking about: happiness, success, resiliency. For children to thrive is what they really need is a 5-to-1 ratio.
Oh,
So
really? 5-to-1. Explain that. No, that's, I'm curious.
Yeah, yeah. And, I'll give you a little bit of background. It's really, really fascinating. John Gottman, who's an expert in couples therapy, did some research and was looking at it and discovered that couples, when they're the way that they have more, what he called the masters of marriage, the way they have more successful relationships is that they actually have a 20-to-1 ratio where they're constantly thanking each other and appreciating what the other person does and everything else, to every one little grump or irritation.
Okay.
But in the conflict, the couple has a 5-to-1. Research was then expanded to say, well, how does this affect kids? And they went in, and the same thing was true. So for children thrive and this was in the classroom setting, but children thrive. It builds their self-esteem. It builds their sense of themselves when there is 5 positive reinforcements to every one correction, right? Because we do have to correct kids. I'm not saying we don't correct kids.
Right.
But so that 5-to-1, and interestingly, the research went into the workplace too. That 5 and 1 stood in the workplace as well. So as human beings, we need the positive, we need the praise to help build our sense of ourselves.
So what I hear you saying is, give them 5, love them 5 times before you correct them once.
Something like that.
Okay, that sounds cool. I like that. So let's go to soothed. I mean, it seems like by giving them that love over the correction, they're going to be fairly soothed. But is that something a little different?
It is a little bit different. So the soothing, and the big picture is really knowing that you're going to be there for them, even when they're hurting, even when stuff is difficult, even when stuff is hard, that you're still going to be there for them. And a lot of the soothing, it doesn't mean that we jump in and we rescue them, right? That's not what we're talking about, because that's not going to help them to learn and build their own skills in life. But it does mean that when I'm at my worst, when I've screwed up, when I've messed up, when I've made a mistake, right? You're still going to be there for me. Or when I'm having a hard time and hurting because of something that happened to me, you're still going to be there. Okay. So the soothing gets much more to it's to those moment-to-moment interactions in the hard times. And so it's that ability, if I go to like a 2-year-old that has their little temper tantrums, which they do because they're trying to figure out themselves. And if in the midst of their 2-year-old is having a temper tantrum and they're like, I wanted that cookie and you didn't let me have that cookie and I hate you, mommy, right? When we're doing that, right? If as a parent, and this creates both the safe and the seen and then the soothe, right? If I don't know my own stuff, and I get upset and I react, right, by yelling at them. And it's like, how can you say that? I'm your mother and I do everything for you. And blah, 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 blah. And I react to them. That has the negative impact. They don't feel safe. They definitely are not seen, and they're not feeling soothed in that space. Versus a parent, I'm not saying nothing is perfect. We don't ever have to be perfect in parenting, which is a dang good thing. Right. But instead, if as a parent, I'm like, oh, honey, no, it's so disappointing that you can't have that cookie right now. That's really frustrating. Hey, I see those Legos over there. Let's go play Lego right now. Right. So I stay with them and I soothe them. I don't correct them or shame them or discipline them. I stay with them in those moments. And then I get
I think a lot of parents kind of forget that little child doesn't have the same reasoning factor and they're working more on emotion than intellect. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, the parent sometimes responds back with that emotion and not thinking that, well, they talk back to the child like they think they're an adult or something. So it's not productive. So,
Yeah.
so what I see or hear you saying in the soothing aspect is simply letting the child know you have them, you have their
Yeah.
back, you understand them, you're with them. And just through your actions and your purpose, you are showing and demonstrating you love them, you care for them, no matter what's going on.
Exactly. And it really has a lot. This definitely has to do with the emotional supporting piece, right? So there's a helping them to name their, because exactly what you just said, they're still figuring out how to manage their emotions when they're younger. So we're even helping them by naming their feeling in the moment, right?
Okay.
We're helping them by being able sometimes to empathize and articulate what may be going on for them. We're helping them by sometimes validating. It's like, gosh, that makes sense. I'd probably feel that way too, right? So all of that is the way that we soothe them in the hard times. And a little tip here is, because again, remember I said as parents, we are not perfect. We're not perfect. We don't have to be perfect. But one of the other ways, and we'll get to this with the next one, which is the secure attachment, but it fits with soothing. You know what? When I blow it and I come back and I apologize to you because I blew it, right? That's actually teaching them, oh, I don't have to be perfect either. I can blow it sometimes, but we're still okay.
Well, that sounds fantastic. So, okay. So we got this one more item here, secure. So we've got this 4 items. We got your safe, seen, soothed, and secure. So what does that mean? Because it sounds like we've got the security going on in all the 3 of those.
And really the way that this works is the safe, seen, and soothed. When you do that consistently, you actually now, because it's happening over and over again, and you're creating the beautiful, resilient mind, you are now creating that secure attachment. So it really is the combination of those 3, but the consistency of that they now can trust me. There's a predictability as that safe, presence, and soothing parent. So the security then comes. And what's so amazing about the secure attachment, and this is exactly where that resilient mind, where the happiness and success comes from, is because now what we've created in them is the ability now within themselves to be able to create safety within themselves, to see themselves and value themselves, and to know how to soothe themselves. Because in this consistent, secure, predictable relationship, they now know how to do it within themselves. And that's what builds, self-esteem and so many amazing other things for children.
So if someone who's listening to this chat we're having right now recognizes within themselves that maybe they could step up a little bit in these aspects, what can they do about that now? Is there anything available to them right now that they can
Yes,
use, or do they
absolutely.
have to go hunt something down?
Yeah, so this kind of fits into some of what you talk about with leadership, or in this case we're talking about family leadership, right?
Right.
There are some things that they can do, and even if they've kind of messed up until this point, but for children at pretty much any age, there's things you can start to do. And the thing that's amazing about children are so forgiving in many, many ways. And so when you start to learn something new and do things differently, and you actually acknowledge that, it's like, oh, mommy hasn't always done this well, and mommy's learning this, or daddy's learning this, and you start to do it differently, that can actually have a positive influence on the children as well, because then you're actually teaching them that you can grow and change and do things different, and they can too. So that really does fit into the kind of the how do you become a great family leader.
Okay.
Right? And that is the first thing is, and I touched on this a little bit, but you actually do have to have awareness of what you grew up with. And so this is the answering that question. Take the time. I don't care whether you find a good journal and start to journal about it, whether you work with a therapist like me, whatever you need to do, but take the time to really understand and go back into how you were parented. Because how you're parented, whether we like it or not, we repeat it. And so we can break those patterns when we take the time to have our own self-awareness. Oftentimes when I sit with parents to do some parenting stuff, or I've been working with the child and then, work with the parents, I will spend time and kind of ask them, well, tell me a little bit about how you were parented. And then I'll ask, well, and how did that type of parenting work for you? What was good about it? What was not good about it? Right. So when you take that time to be responsible, to become self-aware of that, and then you can make the better choices, right? And then that kind of leads into the gift that I have for them, because there's three things as a therapist that I do when I work with adults, but definitely in the parents of this, you have to have that self-awareness. You've got to dig deep enough to understand, that reaction or that trigger or angriness comes from this, or my demand that kids have to respect me or whatever else, that comes from this, right? We start to make those connections. So then you have more choices. So self-awareness is one of the things that I talk about in my gift. But then we have to learn how to control ourselves. That's, this is what we're talking about with kids, right? But we have to be able to know we have to manage our emotions first. And so when we know where sometimes our emotions are coming from, and we know how to, there's so many different, calming techniques. Or let me just excuse myself to the bathroom right now, is what I tell a lot of people. Just
give me just a moment. I've got a phone call to make.
Yeah, exactly. But instead of staying in the space and reacting, that is going to, have some, small trauma reactions to poor child, right? Let me walk away and let me go, mommy needs to take a time out right now.
It's interesting you bring this up. I've been watching it. There's a fairly recent commercial about becoming your parent. And at some way, we are becoming our parents because that's all we know. And I'm thinking that no matter how old we get, and I've got a couple of days behind me, we still have that inner child inside of us that we would like to be loved and seen and soothed and seen.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why, sorry, Daniel, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and that's why people like you are in this role to help us figure this out.
Yeah. Yes. And that's why it becomes so important that you do have a safe space where you can look back and figure this stuff out. Because I have certainly heard my mother's words fly out of my mouth. I'm sure you have. I'm sure, the listeners do too, right? We do. We bring our past into our present. We bring it into how we parent. The two places we bring it in the most, right, is our closest relationships, how we parent, and with our significant other.
Right.
And so when you become aware of it, and then you know how to go, oh, wait, I'm not in a good space. Let me go to the bathroom. Let me take a time out. Let me close my mouth and calm myself down first. Then we're able to come around to do things different and better. And then the last piece, that I always talk a little bit about is there is a time and a space to speak up effectively, right? And that's some of what we're talking about. We want our children to be able to do that. When I was saying help them to identify their feelings, right? When we can say, and I teach this to young children all the time, there's the big fancy communication I statement that we all know about, but we don't do. But with children, it really is, I feel and I need, right? I'm feeling scared. I need the light left on. I'm feeling sad. I need a hug, right? It's those simple things. And yet even adults don't know how to do that well. And how are you going to teach and help your children to do that well if you don't know how to do that well?
That's quite true. We only know what we know, and there's ways for us as we get older to change that 9-year-old brain to make it better. And speaking of, you mentioned that you have a free gift for people who are listening to this, and you call it the How to Stop Being Your Own Worst Enemy. So why am I being my own worst enemy? I love me. I'm not going to be my own worst enemy. I'm going to do everything I can to do me. What are you talking about?
I know. I love. Yeah. The reason why I named that is because it fits exactly with what we're talking about right here. If we are not aware of our past, and you were even talking about that little kid inside of us that still wants to be loved or still wants to be, valued, or what, if we're not aware that still is playing in us and playing out in all of our relationships,
right,
then we will keep behaving in ways that make things worse for ourselves, right?
Because we don't know any better.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
So according to what you told me, we can find this if we go to masteringyourresults.com. And for those of you listening, we're going to have this somewhere down on this page here somewhere. It's going to be to the left, to the right, the top, or bottom. I don't know. It's going to be in here. It's going to be with all the information about Deborah, how to contact Deborah. Speaking of Deborah, how would we get a hold of you if we wanted to?
Yes, you can reach out to me at Deborah@DeborahMorehead.com. And
Oh, how simple can that be? I know.
Yes.
Okay, so that's your email, Deborah@DeborahMorehead.com. Cool. All right, Deborah. So we've discussed a lot of stuff about keeping our children safe, about raising a powerful young individual to let loose on the world, because that's going to happen someday. So is there anything that we haven't talked about? Have we glossed over anything or ignored something, or is there something that's popped up while you were talking you'd like to speak on?
I think we've covered it all. The whole goal of all of this is that we can help create happy, successful, resilient, healthy brain, children, when we are really aware of, the what we talked about, the safe, the seen, and the soothed. We create that secure attachment. And I will really say, if you did not have the secure attachment growing up so I'll add this, if you didn't have the secure attachment growing up in your childhood, which sadly not everyone does, right? That make sure you go find a therapist, find a coach, find someone because it all starts with our first connections. And that's why the parenting piece we're talking about. So if you didn't get that, you still can have that and create that within yourself. And when you create that within yourself, you're going to be so much of a better parent and create this for your children.
Sounds fantastic, Debbie. All right. So I'm so happy that you came with us today. You have such valuable information. And I know somebody out there is listening to it. They're going to be able to take charge of it, grab it, and do something wonderful with it. So everybody out there, this is Daniel with the Emergency Action Planning Broadcast System, Deborah Morehead, who's just a wonderful individual who wants your children to be safe and secure. Debbie, thank you for coming on. And I look forward to seeing some of the wonderful things you're going to be doing in the future.
Thank you, Daniel.
All right. That's it. Goodbye, folks.
Bye.
Hello there. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, comment, share, and take advantage of our limited time special offer at www.eapready.com.